Good afternoon, viewers. Thanks for tuning in this afternoon. I'm Samiksha Srivastava, tracking the big story coming in this hour. 2 arrests have been made in Satyendar Jain case. Those who are handling the accounts on behalf of Satyendar Jain have now been arrested. We have our senior editor, Shravan, on the ground getting us all those details. Shravan, what more can you tell us?
Well, Samiksha, two close aides of Satyendar Jain who have been called in for questioning multiple times by the Enforcement Directorate have finally been placed under arrest. The details that we do have at this point in time is that these two aides of Satyendar Jain were essentially taking care of the companies that were under the scanner. In fact, these are companies that were directly or indirectly controlled by Satyendar Jain. The allegation essentially being that Satyendar Jain, despite being a minister, was actually controlling these very companies, and these companies were involved in hawala transactions. In fact, what Satyendar Jain had essentially indicated in various of the court hearings is that he had already resigned from the directorship of these very companies. But Enforcement Directorate in its investigation essentially found out that even after stepping down as the director of these very companies, two of his close aides were running these companies. There were about 56 paper companies and hawala transactions that were taking place. At least 4 to 5 hawala transactions that have taken place, all under the instructions of Satyendar Jain himself. Now that's the allegation that has been leveled by the Enforcement Directorate. What we are also picking up is that both of them have been closely connected to Satyendar Jain's families. In fact, the Enforcement Directorate also suspects that after stepping down, two of the close aides were made the directors, and as well as Satyendar Jain's wife, she was basically controlling some of these very companies, and that is the reason why two of these aides have now been finally placed under arrest.
Yes, Shravan, if you could talk to us more about these hawala companies and the probe which has happened so far, if you could give us the inside details.
Well, in fact, you're looking at least 56 paper companies and at least 4 to 5 companies of Satyendar Jain. And Central Bureau of Investigation and the Enforcement Directorate, both of them have basically looked into the disproportionate assets case. In fact, the Central Bureau of Investigation, in its charge sheet that has been filed in this case, they say that they've come across 217% disproportionate assets after probing this entire matter. In fact, Satyendar Jain has been named as an accused in the charge sheet that has been filed by the Central Bureau of Investigation. And based on that, an FIR was basically registered by the Enforcement Directorate, and following at least 7 to 8 times of questioning Satyendar Jain, he was also placed under arrest. Now, the Enforcement Directorate has heavily relied on the statements that have been recorded so far under Section 50 of the PMLA Act. And what they're also looking at is some of the statements that were basically given by these hawala operators who were based out of Kolkata. In fact, some of these hawala operators have admitted before the Enforcement Directorate that these transactions did actually take place following the instructions of Satyendar Jain himself.
Yes. Yes, and Shravan, very shortly, if you could tell us what sources are telling you at this point in terms of these hawala companies. We are getting to know that even after he resigned, Satyendra had full control of these companies.
Well, in fact, if you go by the statements that have been made by the Aam Aadmi Party as well as Satyendar Jain himself, they are saying that these were companies that were controlled by him before he became a minister. Now, what has exactly happened is that these hawala transactions have taken place, and thereafter these proceeds of crime were basically used to buy properties. In fact, agricultural land was bought in areas in the vicinity of the national capital. Some say that these were in unauthorized colonies where the properties were actually bought. The Enforcement Directorate has already attached some properties as far as this particular case is concerned. And these very companies, what the CBI as well as the Enforcement Directorate basically suspects is that even after stepping down, there was rather a technical control that Satyendar Jain had over these very companies. And that is the reason why they're saying that it is, after all, a hogwash this entire stepping down from the directorship of these very companies was nothing but a hogwash, because it was his close aides who were running these very companies, that too at the instructions of Satyendar Jain.
Yes, Shravan, thank you so much. We'll keep coming back to you as you track all the latest on that. So, Shravan, they're getting us all the details after fresh arrests have been made by the Enforcement Directorate in the Satyendar Jain case.